Dr. Marcus Wellington stepped out of his silver Mercedes, adjusting his expensive watch as he walked toward the medical conference center. At 42, he had everything most people dreamed of: a successful cardiology practice, a mansion in the hills, and respect from colleagues worldwide. His life was perfectly organized, just like his spotless white coat and polished shoes. The conference had ended earlier than expected, so Marcus decided to take a different route home through the older part of town. He rarely drove through these neighborhoods anymore, not since he had moved to the wealthy district 5 years ago. The contrast was striking. Cracked sidewalks replaced smooth pavements, and small houses stood where grand estates should be. As he stopped at a red light, something caught his eye near a row of garbage bins behind a rundown apartment building. A woman was carefully sorting through the trash, her movements deliberate and practiced. She wore faded jeans and a worn jacket, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. There was something familiar about the way she moved, the curve of her shoulders, the tilt of her head. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Even from a distance, even after 7 years, he recognized her immediately. Sarah Chen, the woman who had once been everything to him, the woman who had disappeared from his life without explanation, leaving only a brief note saying she needed to go away and couldn't tell him why. He pulled his car to the side of the road, his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Sarah looked thinner than he remembered, her face more angular, but it was definitely her. She was searching through the garbage with careful precision, occasionally pulling out items and placing them in a small bag beside her. The sight confused him. Sarah had been a brilliant medical student when they were together, top of her class at Johns Hopkins. They had planned to open a practice together, maybe even get married. She came from a good family. Her father was a respected engineer, her mother a teacher. Why would she be digging through trash? Marcus sat in his car for several minutes watching her. She seemed focused on specific items, not randomly searching. She picked up cans and bottles, examined them, and either kept them or put them back. Her movements were efficient, like someone who had done this many times before. He thought about approaching her, but something held him back. The Sarah he knew had been proud, independent, always perfectly put together. Seeing her like this felt like witnessing something private, something she wouldn't want him to see. A car honked behind him, and Marcus realized he was blocking traffic. He drove forward slowly, keeping Sarah in his rearview mirror until she disappeared from sight. His mind raced with questions. What had happened to her? Where had she been? All these years, why was she going through garbage? That night, Marcus couldn't concentrate on anything. He tried to review patient files, but Sarah's image kept appearing in his mind. He attempted to watch television, but found himself staring at the screen without seeing anything. He paced around his large, empty house, the silence making his thoughts even louder. He remembered their last conversation 7 years ago. They had been planning their future together, discussing which medical specialties they might choose, talking about the kind of life they wanted to build. Sarah had seemed happy, excited about their plans. Then the next morning she was gone. Her roommate said she had packed a single bag and left before dawn, leaving only a handwritten note for Marcus. The note had been brief and mysterious. Marcus, I have to leave. Please don't try to find me. This isn't about you or anything you did wrong. I just can't explain right now. Maybe someday you'll understand. Take care of yourself. Sarah. He had tried to find her, of course. He called her family, but they claimed they didn't know where she had gone. He contacted friends, checked with the medical school, even hired a private investigator. It was as if Sarah Chen had simply vanished from existence. Eventually, Marcus had forced himself to move on. He finished medical school, completed his residency, and built his successful practice. He dated other women, had a few serious relationships, but none of them ever made him feel the way Sarah had. There was always something missing, a piece of his heart that had left with her that morning 7 years ago. Now, seeing her again brought all those old feelings rushing back, mixed with new confusion and concern. The successful doctor in him wanted to help her, to understand what had gone wrong in her life. The man who had loved her wanted to approach her, to demand answers about why she had left. But another part of him was afraid of what he might Learn. Afraid that the Sarah he remembered might be gone forever, replaced by someone he didn't recognize, Marcus walked to his home office and sat at his mahogany desk, staring at the diplomas and awards on his walls. All of his achievements suddenly felt hollow. He had built this successful life partly to prove to himself that he could move on without Sarah, that he could be happy and accomplished on his own. He opened his laptop and searched for her name online, something he had stopped doing years ago. There were no recent results, no social media profiles, no professional listings. It was as if she had deliberately erased herself from the digital world. The clock on his desk showed midnight, but Marcus wasn't tired. He kept thinking about the way Sarah had moved while searching through the garbage, the careful way she had examined each item. It didn't look like desperation or random searching. It looked purposeful, like she was looking for something specific. He made a decision. Tomorrow he would drive back to that neighborhood. He would wait and watch, try to understand what was happening in Sarah's life. He needed to know if she was in trouble, if she needed help. He owed it to their past, to the love they had shared, to at least try to understand what had become of the brilliant, ambitious woman he had once planned to marry. Marcus finally went to bed, but sleep came fitfully. He dreamed of Sarah as she used to be, laughing at his jokes, studying beside him in the library, making plans for their future together. When he woke, he felt more determined than ever to find out the truth about what had happened to her. The next evening, Marcus found himself parked across the street from the same apartment building, feeling like a spy in his own life. He had rescheduled 2 patient appointments and left his office early, something he never did. His colleagues would have been shocked to see the always punctual Dr. Wellington sitting in his car, waiting for a woman to appear at garbage bins. Sarah showed up just as the sun was setting, carrying the same small bag and wearing different clothes but with the same purposeful manner. Marcus watched as she approached the bins behind the building next door this time. She worked methodically, examining items with what looked like scientific precision. This time Marcus noticed something else. Sarah wasn't just randomly searching through garbage. She seemed to know exactly what she was looking for. She would examine certain items very carefully, sometimes using a small tool she pulled from her pocket. Occasionally, she would place something in a separate container, handling it very gently. After about 30 minutes, a man approached her. Marcus tensed, ready to help if needed, but the interaction seemed friendly. The man appeared to be in his 60s, wearing work clothes and a kind smile. He handed Sarah a thermos and what looked like a sandwich wrapped in paper. They talked for a few minutes, and Sarah smiled, the first time Marcus had seen her smile since spotting her. The man pointed toward the apartment building, and Sarah nodded. They walked together toward the entrance, and Marcus realized with surprise that Sarah apparently lived there. This wasn't just someone who had fallen on hard times and was homeless. She had a place to live in this modest neighborhood. Marcus felt confused but also relieved. At least she had shelter, and apparently had made a friend who cared enough to bring her food. But questions still swirled in his mind. Why was she going through garbage if she had a home? What was she looking for with such careful attention? He decided to wait a bit longer to see if Sarah would come back out. About an hour later, she emerged from the building carrying a different bag and wearing rubber gloves. This time she went to bins further down the alley, moving with the same systematic approach. Marcus couldn't stand it anymore. He got out of his car and slowly walked toward the alley, trying to look casual, like he was just passing through the neighborhood. As he got closer, he could see Sarah more clearly. She looked healthier than he had first thought. Her skin had color, her movements were strong and coordinated. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't the desperate searching of someone who was starving. Sarah was focused on a particular garbage bag, carefully opening it and sorting through its contents. She pulled out several small bottles and containers, examining each one closely. She kept some and discarded others, placing the chosen items in her bag with extreme care. Suddenly, Sarah looked up and saw him standing there. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Their eyes met across the dimly lit alley, and Marcus saw a mixture of shock, fear, and something else he couldn't identify cross her face. Marcus? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, as if she couldn't believe he was real. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time." Sarah quickly closed her bag and stood up, removing her rubber gloves. She looked like she wanted to run, her body tense and ready for flight. "What are you doing here?" I could ask you the same question. Marcus replied gently, trying not to sound accusatory. I was driving through the neighborhood yesterday and saw you. I had to come back. I had to know if it was really you. Sarah's eyes darted around the alley as if checking for escape routes. You shouldn't be here, Marcus. You should just go back to your life and forget you saw me. I can't do that, Sarah. Not after 7 years of wondering what happened to you. Not after seeing you like this. He gestured toward the garbage bins. What's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need help? Sarah's expression hardened. I don't need help. I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to do. Looking through garbage? Sarah, you were going to be a doctor. You were brilliant, ambitious. What happened? For a moment, Sarah's tough exterior cracked, and Marcus saw a flash of pain in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. People change, Marcus. Dreams change. This is my life now, but why? What happened 7 years ago? Why did you leave without any explanation? Sarah picked up her bag and started walking toward the apartment building. Some things are better left in the past, Marcus. You have a good life. I've seen the articles about your success, your practice. Don't let my problems mess that up. Marcus followed her. You've been keeping track of me. Sarah stopped walking but didn't turn around. It's hard not to. Dr. Marcus Wellington, the celebrated cardiologist. You're exactly where you always said you wanted to be. None of it means anything without understanding what happened to us. What happened to you? Marcus said softly. Sarah turned around then, and Marcus was startled by the intensity in her eyes. You want to know what happened? Life happened, Marcus. Real life with real consequences for real people. Not everyone gets to live in a perfect world where everything works out according to plan. Tell me. Let me understand. Let me help you, Sarah shook her head. You can't help me, Marcus. Nobody can help me. And you definitely shouldn't get involved in this. In what? What is this exactly? Marcus gestured toward her bag. What are you really doing out here? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with some internal decision. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I'm trying to save lives, Marcus. In the only way I can. Before he could ask what she meant, Sarah hurried toward the apartment building. She paused at the entrance and looked back at him. Please, Marcus. For your own safety, forget you saw me. Go back to your world and stay there. Then she disappeared inside, leaving Marcus standing alone in the alley with more questions than ever. Her words echoed in his mind. I'm trying to save lives. What did that mean? How could searching through garbage save lives? Marcus returned to his car, his mind spinning with possibilities. Sarah hadn't looked like someone who had given up on life. She had looked like someone with a mission, someone doing something important. But what could be so important that it required her to hide from her old life? To disappear completely. He sat in his car for another hour, hoping Sarah might come back out, but the apartment building remained quiet. Finally, he drove home, but he knew this wouldn't be the end of it. He had found Sarah, and despite her warnings, he wasn't going to walk away again. Whatever secret she was hiding, whatever danger she was referring to, he was going to find out the truth. Marcus couldn't focus on his patients the next day. During a routine consultation, he found himself staring out the window, thinking about Sarah's words. I'm trying to save lives. The phrase haunted him, especially combined with her warning about his safety. What kind of danger could be connected to searching through garbage? After his last appointment, Marcus made a decision that went against his usually careful nature. He drove back to Sarah's neighborhood, but this time he parked several blocks away and walked. He wanted to observe without being seen, to understand what Sarah was really doing. He positioned himself behind a delivery truck where he could watch the alley without being obvious. As darkness fell, Sarah appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, accompanied her. The younger woman looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. Marcus watched as Sarah led the woman to a specific dumpster behind what appeared to be a pharmacy. Sarah put on her rubber gloves and began searching through medical waste containers with practiced efficiency. She pulled out several small vials and bottles, examining each one with a small flashlight. The young woman kept watch while Sarah worked. Occasionally, Sarah would show her something, pointing to labels on bottles and explaining something in hushed tones. The woman nodded eagerly as if receiving important information. Then Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Sarah carefully placed several prescription bottles in her bag, along with what looked like unopened packages of medical supplies. She was stealing medications from medical waste. But why? Was Sarah addicted to drugs? Had that been the reason she disappeared 7 years ago? The thought made Marcus feel sick. The brilliant, ethical woman he had loved couldn't have become a drug dealer, could she? As if sensing his thoughts, Sarah suddenly looked in his direction. Even from a distance, Marcus felt like she could see right through his hiding spot. She said something quickly to her companion, and both women hurried away from the dumpster. Marcus followed them at a distance, staying in the shadows. To his surprise, they didn't go to Sarah's apartment building. Instead, they walked several blocks to a different part of the neighborhood. Stopping at a small house with a carefully tended garden, Sarah knocked on the door in a specific pattern, 3 quick knocks, then 2 slow ones. An elderly woman answered, looking around nervously before quickly ushering them inside. Marcus crept closer to the house, trying to see through the windows. The curtains were mostly drawn, but he could make out several people inside, all sitting around a kitchen table. Sarah had opened her bag and was distributing the items she had collected, explaining something to each person as she handed them medications. One of the people at the table was an elderly man who appeared to be having trouble breathing. Sarah knelt beside him, checking his pulse and listening to his chest with a stethoscope she pulled from her bag. She gave him one of the bottles she had retrieved, showing him how much to take and when. Another person was a middle-aged woman with a young child who looked fevered and weak. Sarah examined the child gently, then provided what appeared to be antibiotics, carefully explaining the dosage to the worried mother. Marcus watched in amazement as Sarah moved from person to person around the table, providing medical care and medications to what appeared to be a group of people who couldn't afford proper health care. This wasn't drug dealing. This was illegal medical practice. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Sarah hadn't given up medicine. She had gone underground with it. She was providing health care to people who couldn't access it through normal channels, using medications that had been thrown away by pharmacies and hospitals. It was illegal, dangerous, and completely against everything they had been taught in medical school about proper procedures and safety protocols. But it was also the most compassionate thing Marcus had ever witnessed. He thought about the expensive medical conference he had attended, where doctors discussed the latest costly treatments while these people couldn't afford basic medications. He thought about his own practice, where patients sometimes left without needed prescriptions because they couldn't pay for them. Suddenly, everything made sense. Sarah's disappearance, her secrecy, her warnings about danger. If she was caught providing unlicensed medical care and distributing controlled substances, she could face serious criminal charges. Anyone associated with her could be considered an accomplice. Marcus watched for another hour as Sarah continued treating people. Some left with medications, others received advice and instructions for care. She took no money, asked for nothing in return. This was purely about helping people who had nowhere else to turn. When the last person left, Sarah and her companion began cleaning up. Marcus saw Sarah carefully sanitizing surfaces and properly disposing of materials she couldn't use. Even in this illegal operation, she maintained medical standards and protocols. As they prepared to leave, Sarah stopped at the window and looked directly at where Marcus was hiding. She couldn't possibly see him in the darkness, but somehow she knew he was there. She stepped outside and walked toward his hiding spot. "You might as well come out, Marcus. I know you're there." Marcus emerged from behind the parked car, feeling caught and ashamed. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to spy on you. I just needed to understand." Sarah looked at him with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Now you know. Are you going to turn me in?" "Turn you in?" "Sarah, what you're doing in there, it's incredible. Those people need help and you're providing it. What I'm doing is illegal, Marcus. I have no license, no legal authority to practice medicine. I'm stealing controlled substances and providing medical care without proper oversight. In the eyes of the law, I'm a criminal. But you're saving lives." Sarah's companion appeared beside them, looking suspicious and ready to run. Sarah put a calming hand on her arm. "It's okay, Maria, this is an old friend." Maria looked between them skeptically. "Is he safe?" Sarah studied Marcus's face in the dim streetlight. "I don't know yet. Are you, Marcus? Are you safe?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus realized that his answer would determine not just their relationship, but possibly the future of Sarah's entire operation. These people were depending on her and she was risking everything to help them. "I want to understand more," Marcus said finally. I want to know how this started, why you chose this path. And I want to know how I can help." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Marcus, you can't. You have too much to lose. Your practice, your reputation, your freedom. If you get involved in this and we're caught, you'll lose everything you've worked for. Maybe what I've worked for isn't as important as what you're working for," Marcus replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "You don't understand what you're saying. Come with me tomorrow night and I'll show you exactly what this world is like. Then you can decide if you really want to be part of it." Marcus spent the entire next day in a state of nervous anticipation. He found himself making mistakes during routine procedures, his mind constantly wandering to Sarah and the promise she had made to show him her world. His nurse Janet asked him twice if he was feeling well. That evening, Marcus met Sarah at the agreed location, a small park 3 blocks from her apartment. She was waiting on a bench wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. When she saw him approaching, she stood up and began walking without a word. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as he fell into step beside her. "You wanted to understand what I do," Sarah replied quietly. "Tonight you'll see the whole picture. But Marcus, once you see this, you can't unsee it. Your comfortable world, where everyone has health insurance and can afford their medications, that world will never feel the same." They walked through increasingly run-down neighborhoods, past abandoned buildings and overcrowded housing projects. Sarah moved with confidence through areas where Marcus would never have felt safe alone. She knew these streets, these people, this hidden world that existed alongside his privileged one. Their first stop was a homeless encampment under a highway overpass. Sarah greeted several people by name, asking about their health and checking on medications she had provided on previous visits. An older man named Carlos showed her an infected wound on his leg that wasn't healing properly. Marcus watched as Sarah examined the wound with a small pen light, her movements professional and thorough despite the difficult conditions. She cleaned the infection carefully and applied antibiotic ointment, explaining to Carlos how to keep it clean and when to change the dressing. "Carlos is diabetic," Sarah explained to Marcus as they walked away. "He can't afford insulin regularly, so his blood sugar spikes cause slow healing. The antibiotics I give him come from hospital waste, medications that were opened but not used, or near their expiration dates. But those medications could be contaminated or ineffective," Marcus protested, his medical training making him uncomfortable. "Yes, they could be, but Carlos's choice is between potentially contaminated antibiotics and definitely dying from infection. Which would you choose?" Marcus had no answer for that. Their second stop was a rundown apartment building where Maria, Sarah's companion from the night before, lived with her grandmother and 2 young cousins. The grandmother, Elena, had severe arthritis but couldn't afford the medications that would ease her pain and inflammation. Sarah examined Elena's swollen joints and provided anti-inflammatory medications, along with detailed instructions about dosage and potential side effects. The relief on the elderly woman's face was immediate and profound. "Elena worked in factories her whole life," Sarah explained as they climbed down the dark stairwell. "No health insurance, no retirement savings. Her social security barely covers rent and food. The medications she needs would cost more than she receives each month. There are programs, assistance options," Marcus said weakly, "with waiting lists months long and qualification requirements that eliminate most of the people who need help most," Sarah countered. "Elena doesn't have months to wait while her joints deteriorate." Their third stop shook Marcus to his core. They visited a young mother named Rosa, who was trying to care for her 6-year-old son, Tommy, who had asthma. The boy's breathing was labored and his lips had a bluish tint that Marcus recognized as a sign of oxygen deprivation. Sarah immediately began treating Tommy with an inhaler she pulled from her bag. Within minutes, the boy's breathing improved dramatically, and color returned to his face. Tommy's father left when he was diagnosed, Rosa explained in broken English, tears streaming down her face. "I work 2 jobs, but neither gives insurance. Emergency room costs too much, regular doctor costs too much. Sarah is only reason Tommy is alive." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he watched Tommy play with a broken toy truck, breathing easily now thanks to Sarah's intervention. This child could die without regular access to asthma medications, and his mother was working 2 jobs but still couldn't afford basic health care. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus asked Sarah as they walked to their next destination. I started 7 years ago, about 6 months after I left medical school, Sarah replied. I was volunteering at a free clinic and saw how many people were turned away every day. People who were sick, desperate, but didn't qualify for the limited services available. So you just decided to practice medicine illegally? Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. I decided to choose between following the law and saving lives. Every medication I take from medical waste would otherwise be incinerated or thrown in landfills. Every person I treat would otherwise suffer without care or die. Tell me, Marcus, which choice would you have made? Their final stop of the night was the most dangerous. Sarah led him into an abandoned warehouse where a group of undocumented immigrants had taken shelter. These people lived in constant fear of deportation and couldn't seek medical care through any official channels. Among them was a pregnant woman named Carmen, who was in her 8th month. Sarah had been providing prenatal care, monitoring the baby's development and Carmen's health. When they arrived, Carmen was experiencing contractions and Sarah immediately began examining her. She's in early labor, Sarah told Marcus quietly. The baby is coming whether we're ready or not. For the next 4 hours, Marcus watched Sarah deliver a baby in conditions that would have horrified any medical professional. Using equipment she had collected from medical waste and sterilized herself, Sarah safely brought a new life into the world while the baby's father held a flashlight, and Marcus assisted however he could. When baby Sophia finally arrived, healthy and crying, Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He had delivered babies in state-of-the-art hospital facilities, but he had never witnessed anything as profound as this moment. Sarah had saved 2 lives in a warehouse with thrown-away medical supplies and sheer determination. As they walked home in the early morning light, Marcus was quiet, processing everything he had seen. Sarah had shown him a world where people suffered and died, not because medical help didn't exist, but because they couldn't afford to access it. Now you understand, Sarah said as they reached her apartment building. This isn't about being a hero or breaking rules for excitement. These people have nowhere else to turn. If I don't help them, nobody will. How many people are you treating? About 60 regular patients, but word spreads. Sometimes I see new people every week. People who heard from someone else that there's a doctor who will help them even if they can't pay. Marcus thought about his own practice, where he saw maybe 30 patients a week, all of whom had insurance and could afford their medications. Sarah was treating twice as many people with a fraction of the resources. Sarah, what you're doing is incredible, but it's not sustainable. You're one person and you're taking huge risks. If you get caught, I know the risks, Marcus. I live with them every day. But what's the alternative? Let these people suffer? Let children like Tommy die because their mothers can't afford inhalers? Marcus looked up at Sarah's apartment building, thinking about his mansion in the hills. He thought about his expensive car, his collection of medical awards, his comfortable life built while people like Elena and Carmen struggled just blocks away. I want to help, he said quietly. Sarah shook her head. Marcus, you saw what this world is like. It's dangerous, it's illegal, and it never ends. Once you start, you can't stop knowing that these people need help. Are you really ready to risk everything you've built? Marcus thought about everything he had witnessed that night. Tommy's labored breathing, Elena's pain-twisted hands, baby Sophia's first cry in that dark warehouse. Then he thought about his empty mansion and his successful practice that treated only people who could already afford health care. Yes, he said with certainty, I'm ready to risk everything. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself living a double life he never could have imagined. During the day, he maintained his successful cardiology practice, treating wealthy patients in his pristine office. At night, he worked alongside Sarah in the shadows, providing medical care to people who had been forgotten by the system. The transition hadn't been easy. Marcus had to learn new skills, how to sterilize equipment with limited resources, how to diagnose conditions without expensive tests, how to treat patients in dark alleys and abandoned buildings. Most challenging of all, he had to learn to work with uncertainty, to make medical decisions without the safety net of hospital backup and unlimited resources. Sarah had been patient but demanding, teaching him the realities of underground medicine. Forget everything you learned about ideal conditions, she had told him during his first week. Here, we work with what we have, and what we have is usually not enough. You have to be creative, resourceful, and willing to take calculated risks. Marcus had started small, accompanying Sarah on her rounds and learning the patient's stories. He met Roberto, a construction worker whose back injury had cost him his job and his insurance. Without workers' compensation, Roberto couldn't afford the physical therapy and pain medications he needed. So he had been living on cheap beer and desperation until Sarah found him. There was also Grace, an elderly woman with diabetes who was rationing her insulin because she couldn't afford regular doses. Sarah had been keeping her alive with insulin samples and expired medications, but Grace's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The most heartbreaking case was Miguel, a 15-year-old boy with epilepsy whose seizures were becoming more frequent and severe. His family had brought him to the United States illegally when he was young, and they lived in constant fear that seeking medical help would lead to deportation. As Marcus became more involved, he began to understand the complex network Sarah had built. She had contacts at several hospitals and pharmacies who would discreetly set aside medications that were about to be discarded. She had relationships with nurses who would share information about free clinic schedules and patient resources. Most importantly, she had earned the trust of a community that had learned to survive without official help. But Marcus also began to see the strain this life was taking on Sarah. She barely slept, ate irregularly, and was constantly stressed about being discovered. The weight of responsibility for so many lives was crushing, and she had been carrying it alone for 7 years. "Sarah, you're going to burn out," Marcus told her one night as they walked home after treating a family with food poisoning. "You can't keep this pace forever." "I don't have a choice," Sarah replied, exhaustion clear in her voice. "These people depend on me. If I take a break, people suffer. If I get sick, people die. That's exactly why you need help. That's why I'm here now." Sarah stopped walking and looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. This isn't just about providing health care to people who can't afford it. There are people who want to stop what we're doing, and they're getting closer." "What do you mean?" Sarah looked around nervously before continuing. "There's a task force. Police, DEA, medical board investigators. They've been tracking the movement of controlled substances from medical waste. They know someone is taking medications and distributing them. They just don't know who yet." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "How close are they?" "Close enough that I've had to change my methods several times. Close enough that some of my contacts have stopped helping because they're too scared. Close enough that I should probably stop, but..." Sarah gestured toward the neighborhood around them. "How can I stop when people like Miguel and Grace need help?" The next day, Marcus's comfortable world received its first real shock. Detective Patricia Rodriguez appeared at his office during lunch, flashing her badge and asking to speak with him privately. "Dr. Wellington, I'm investigating the theft of controlled substances from medical facilities in this area," Detective Rodriguez said as she sat across from his desk. "We have reason to believe someone with medical training is involved." Marcus tried to keep his expression neutral while his heart pounded. "I'm not sure how I can help you, Detective. We're talking to medical professionals in the area, asking if they've noticed anything unusual. Missing medications, tampered waste containers, anything that might indicate organized theft." "I haven't noticed anything like that," Marcus replied, technically telling the truth since he worked across town from where Sarah operated. Detective Rodriguez studied his face carefully. "Dr. Wellington, I want you to understand something. What we're dealing with isn't some drug dealer looking to make money. The pattern suggests someone is actually providing medical care using stolen medications. While that might seem noble, it's extremely dangerous. Unregulated medications can kill people. Unlicensed medical practice puts patients at risk." "I understand your concern," Marcus said carefully. "If you hear anything at all that might help us stop this before someone gets hurt, I hope you'll contact me." Detective Rodriguez handed him her card. Sometimes people think they're helping, but they're actually making things worse. After she left, Marcus sat in his office staring at the detective's card. Were they really making things worse? Was Sarah's operation actually dangerous to the people they were trying to help? That night, Marcus shared his conversation with Sarah, who received the news with grim resignation. "I knew this day would come," she said. "The question is, how much time do we have before they figure out who we are?" "Sarah, maybe the detective has a point. Maybe what we're doing is actually dangerous. We're using medications that haven't been properly stored. We're practicing without proper oversight." Sarah turned on him with sudden anger. "Are you having second thoughts, Marcus? Because if you are, now is the time to walk away before you're in too deep." "I'm not having second thoughts about helping people," Marcus replied, but I am wondering if there's a better way to do it. Show me a better way, Sarah challenged. Show me a legal way to get insulin for Grace, seizure medication for Miguel, asthma inhalers for Tommy. Show me a system that will help these people, and I'll gladly turn myself in. Marcus had no answer because he knew there wasn't one. The existing system wasn't designed to help people like Sarah's patients. It was designed to help people like his own patients, people with insurance, stable housing, and the ability to navigate complex bureaucracies. Their conversation was interrupted by frantic knocking on Sarah's apartment door. Maria burst in, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, you have to come quickly. It's Miguel. He's having a seizure that won't stop, and his family is afraid to call an ambulance. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her medical bag and ran for the door. Marcus followed, knowing that despite all the risks and moral complexities, they were the only hope Miguel had. As they raced through the dark streets toward another life-or-death situation, Marcus realized that Detective Rodriguez was wrong about one thing. The choice wasn't between safe legal medicine and dangerous illegal medicine. For people like Miguel, the choice was between dangerous, illegal medicine and no medicine at all. But he also knew that their time was running out, and soon they would have to make an impossible choice between their freedom and their patients' lives. Miguel was in status epilepticus when they arrived, a continuous seizure that could cause permanent brain damage or death if not stopped immediately. His family had gathered around him in their small apartment, terrified and helpless. His mother was crying and praying in Spanish while his father paced frantically. Torn between calling for help and protecting his family from potential deportation, Sarah immediately went to work, administering emergency anti-seizure medication, while Marcus helped hold Miguel steady. For several terrifying minutes, the seizure continued, and Marcus wondered if they would lose him. Then gradually, Miguel's convulsions subsided, and he fell into an exhausted sleep. He needs to be in a hospital, Marcus said quietly to Sarah as they monitored Miguel's vital signs. And his family needs to not be deported, Sarah replied. This is why we do what we do, Marcus. Miguel's parents love him just as much as any parents in your wealthy practice, but they have to choose between his medical care and their family's safety. As they sat watching Miguel sleep, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Her face went pale as she read it. What is it? Marcus asked. One of my contacts at St. Mary's Hospital. The police searched the pharmacy's medical waste area today. They found evidence that someone has been systematically taking medications. The reality of their situation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The investigation was closing in, and it was only a matter of time before they were caught. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified. Several of Sarah's contacts stopped communicating with her, too frightened to continue helping. 2 of the locations where they regularly obtained medications were suddenly under surveillance. Sarah was forced to drastically reduce her operations, which meant turning away people who desperately needed help. Marcus watched Sarah struggle with impossible decisions. Grace, the diabetic woman, was running out of insulin, but Sarah couldn't risk getting more without exposing their entire operation. Roberto's back pain was becoming unbearable, but the pain medications were the most heavily monitored substances. We need to stop, Marcus told Sarah after a particularly difficult night where they had to turn away a woman with pneumonia because they couldn't safely obtain antibiotics. The risks are getting too high. I can't stop, Sarah replied, her voice breaking. These people have nowhere else to go. If we stop, some of them will die. If we get caught, all of them will lose their only source of medical care. Sometimes the best way to help people is to live to fight another day. Sarah looked at him with tears in her eyes. 7 years, Marcus? 7 years I've been doing this, and I've saved dozens of lives. How do I just walk away from that? The decision was made for them the following night. As they approached one of their regular medication collection sites, Sarah suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him behind a parked car. Police, she whispered, pointing toward unmarked cars positioned around the building. It's a trap. They crouched behind the car, watching as officers waited for whoever had been taking medications to show up. After an hour, the police gave up and left, but the message was clear. Their operation had been compromised. That's it, Sarah said as they walked home. It's over. I can't risk exposing the people who help us, and I can't risk you getting arrested because of me. So what do we do now? Sarah was quiet for a long time before answering. We disappear. I'll leave town, start over somewhere else. You go back to your practice and pretend you never knew me. Sarah, no. We can find another way. What other way, Marcus? The police know what we're doing. They're watching the sources of medications, and it's only a matter of time before they identify us. The best thing I can do for everyone is disappear. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about everything that had happened since he spotted Sarah in that alley. He thought about Tommy's breathing attacks, Elena's arthritis pain, baby Sophia's birth in the warehouse, and Miguel's seizures. He thought about all the people who would continue to suffer without Sarah's help. Then he thought about his own life, his successful practice, his comfortable house, his professional reputation. For the first time in years, those things felt hollow and meaningless compared to what he had experienced with Sarah. The next morning, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He called his office and cleared his schedule for the day. Then he drove to the offices of the largest newspaper in the city. "I want to tell you about a story," he told the investigative reporter he met with. "A story about people who are dying because they can't afford medical care, and about someone who risked everything to help them." Over the next several hours, Marcus told Sarah's story. He explained the underground medical network, the people they had helped, and the impossible choice between following the law and saving lives. He provided details about specific cases while protecting identities, painting a picture of a healthcare system that was failing its most vulnerable citizens. "Are you willing to go on the record with this?" the reporter asked. "Using your real name?" "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "Someone needs to tell this story, and I'm willing to face the consequences." The article appeared 3 days later on the front page with the headline, "The Underground Doctor: How Healthcare Inequality Creates Medical Vigilantes." Marcus's phone rang constantly as the story spread to national news outlets. The response was overwhelming and divided. Some people called Marcus and Sarah heroes who were exposing the flaws in the healthcare system. Others called them criminals who were endangering patients and undermining medical authority. Detective Rodriguez called Marcus the morning after the article appeared. "Dr. Wellington, I assume you realize what you've done?" "I've told the truth about a situation that needed to be exposed," Marcus replied. "You've also confessed to multiple felonies. I'll need you to come in for questioning." Marcus had expected this call. "I understand, Detective. I'll be there this afternoon." But something unexpected happened as the story gained national attention. Medical professionals from around the country began speaking out about similar situations in their own communities. Politicians were forced to address questions about healthcare access. Most importantly, several prominent medical charities announced new programs to provide medications and care to underserved populations. Sarah called Marcus the night before he was scheduled to be arrested. "Marcus, what have you done?" she asked, but her voice carried admiration rather than anger. "I did what you taught me to do," he replied. "I chose saving lives over following rules. You're going to go to prison because of me. I'm going to go to prison because I made a choice to help people who needed help. And I'd make the same choice again." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "The prosecutor called me today. They want me to turn myself in. Are you going to?" "Yes, but Marcus, something incredible is happening. Do you know how many calls I've gotten from doctors and nurses who want to help? Do you know how many organizations are offering to fund legal medical clinics in underserved areas?" Marcus smiled despite everything. "So some good is coming from this?" "A lot of good. Tommy's family just qualified for a new program that will provide his asthma medications for free. Miguel's family found a clinic that treats undocumented patients without reporting them. Grace is getting insulin through a charity program that started because of your article. Then it was worth it." A year later, Marcus and Sarah stood in the parking lot outside the courthouse after their sentencing hearing. They had both received suspended sentences and community service, partly because of the public support their case had generated, and partly because the prosecutor recognized that their intentions had been to help people. "So what now?" Marcus asked as they walked toward Sarah's car. "Now we do this the right way," Sarah replied, holding up a letter she had received that morning. "The Free Medical Foundation wants us to run their new clinic in the east side of town. Legal practice, proper medications, no more dumpster diving." Marcus laughed. "Imagine that. We get to be doctors again." "We never stopped being doctors, Marcus. We just had to figure out what that really meant." As they drove toward their new clinic, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that day he spotted Sarah in the alley. He had lost his prestigious practice and his perfect reputation, but he had found something more valuable, a purpose that made getting up each morning feel meaningful. Sarah's secret had turned out to be the best kind of secret, one that, when revealed, had made the world a little bit better for the people who needed it most. And Marcus had discovered that sometimes the most important choice a person can make is to risk everything for something bigger than themselves. The end of their underground operation had become the beginning of something even more powerful: legal, sustainable medical care for people who had been forgotten by the system. And it had all started with a successful doctor spotting his ex-girlfriend in the trash, searching for something more valuable than either of them had initially understood.